All right, welcome everybody. We're gonna give everybody some minutes here to filter in. We'll get started just at the top of the hour. Thanks to those of you who are early joining us today. We'll see you in a minute. All right, it's just the top of the hour. We're gonna let people filter in. I'm gonna get started here. My name is Sammy Focarino. I'm the Senior Events Manager here at Consensus, and I'm gonna be the moderator for today's session. Thank you everybody for joining us. This webinar is presented by Consensus. Consensus is an intelligent demo automation platform that enhances customer experiences, engages high potential buyers, and shortens sales cycles with interactive video demos and tours. You can learn more at goconsensus.com. We had such a great time at our first event of the year, which was DemoFest X in West Coast in San Francisco last week. It was so much fun. We were joined by over 200 pre-sales professionals live and in person. The sessions were absolutely killer. It was just a great time. And we're super excited to be gearing up for our next event of the year already, which is May 21st to 23rd. It's going to be DemoFest virtual. So this event, you can join us from anywhere in the world. It's completely virtual. Last year, we saw over 5,000 registrants. So we're super excited to make this year even bigger, even better. Registration will be opening soon. So keep your eyes on your inbox and on social media to see when you can register for that event. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Our speaker will answer questions at the close of the session, but you're welcome to post your questions at any time through Q&A on the right side of your screen. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, press the help button on the right side. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Elizabeth Marino is a frequent speaker on sales enablement and advancing sales selling techniques. An executive board member of the Revenue Enablement Society, her goal is to help revenue organizations thrive for both customers and the host company. She's a purpose and data-driven professional, having been a seller and strategy and enablement manager for over 20 years, primarily in the global enterprise business space. In her current role, she builds scalable programs that drive revenue outcomes in an enterprise global marketing company. It's in her DNA to help other professionals develop the skills and mindset key to driving corporate goals and initiatives. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Elizabeth.
Good morning. I'm so glad you all made it. You're here on Leap Day. And as you know, magical things happen on Leap Day. I hope this is one of them. Sammy did mention that we're going to hold questions until the end of the webinar. That is sort of true. A couple of times I am going to stop and just see if you have any feedback or questions as we go along, but we have found that we stay on topic a little bit better if we stay hold all questions to the end. So without further ado, you can't close what you didn't open. Discovery that drives business outcomes. The title here is about closing business that you didn't open. All sorts of business, all kinds of dollars are on the table when we interact with our customers. But if we don't open a topic, oftentimes our customers don't understand that you can solve a related need to what they originally came to you for. So what we want to do is we want to have broader conversations. Right about here is where people start to say, oh, are we going to get the deck? Yes, Sammy will make sure you get the deck, so don't worry about it. If we want to close bigger deals, we need to open our conversations wider than just the presenting need of our prospect or customer, or wider than the first couple of or most fancy couple of things that our software or our product can do. So today we're going to explore some of the simple tools you can use to make your discovery process more effective. It'll help you land larger deals and build stronger customer relationships. So first off, let's start with what discovery isn't. Discovery is not the introductory call. That's going to be handled by your AE. And no buyer wants to do deep discovery on the initial call, right? All of this is part of qualification and discovery as done by your AE. In a perfect world, that means you get notes about how they're qualified, completed. Make sure you get your basic qualification notes, including the details of the folks who should be on your call. That makes following up with them after the call a whole lot easier. And then lastly, discovery isn't a closing call. When you as sales engineers or pre-sales engineers are doing business, what are you trying to do? You're trying to define scope of work. You're trying to define primary interest in your customer. You're trying to define what it is that your customer has already learned through their own research so that you know what direction to. Now, discovery for you exists on both sides of the deal, right? If it was only one-sided, you could send an email. They do. So on both sides of the deal, there's learning to be done. On both how you can work together, and you want to understand what their process is, maybe for implementation or what their use case is. You want to understand if they've been primarily educated by your competitor, that's not going to help you. If they were for what
I think there might be a
papers,
little bit
that
of
will help you
choppiness.
enormously.
Hi,
Sammy,
Liz.
are we good?
Yeah, we're having a little bit
Oh,
of
I'm so
choppiness on your end. We're like only getting every other word. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if it was just me, but we had a couple people ping me about it. I'm wondering maybe
all right.
we
As I mentioned earlier, we're having a little bit of snow and wind here in Buffalo, so that may be
Oh,
making things a little wonky. I genuinely apologize, folks.
no worries. Maybe we can try. I don't know if you want, I know it's not ideal, but try it maybe without the video so we can make sure to at least get all of the audio through and see if that helps.
This would be very difficult without the video. Can we give it another couple of minutes and see how
Yeah, I
it
just mean like
goes?
your video, not the slides.
Oh, I see. Yeah, give me a sec.
Sometimes that pulls a lot of like the actual self video pulls a lot of like Wi-Fi. Um,
Yeah, all right, give me a sec. Sorry, friends. Let me turn my video off.
no, it's
All
just,
right.
but she's still here, I promise.
All right, can you hear me?
We can, and if you want to pull back the slides up, and then we can try and
All
do it.
right.
All
Is
right.
that better?
I think so right now. I'll let you know if it starts to get choppy again, but sorry.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
All right, cool. So there's going to be research done on both sides of the deal, and you need to know where your customers may have gotten their research. If they've primarily gotten it from your competitor, that's not good for you, right? Because that does not necessarily teach them what you're capable of and how well you can serve and partner with them. On the other hand, maybe they've primarily gotten their education from you, your company, your white papers. So really worthwhile to know where that came from. Next up, who's on the buying team? Besides who's on your call, who's on the buying team? And you would do really well if you learn from your AE what their stake is in the conversation. Do they have budget control? Do they have veto power? There are lots of people on both sides. You also want to introduce on the customer side who they are going to be working with on your side. You want to understand the analysis on both sides. So when they're discussing what it is that you can do for them, they probably not only have some buying criteria, but they also have some outcome metrics that they want to measure your efficacy or your outputs by. Understanding what analysis they've done, how they're going to analyze you for success metrics, all of that's really useful. And obviously comparing back and forth to make sure that they're measuring correctly. How is this deal different from the others? Really important to define what specifically you're going to have to do differently and get that into your scope of work. The deal size, are we scoping large enough? Because often there will be money left on the table if you don't expand your discovery conversation. And timeline, when will we close? And on what timeline do we remain in touch? Staying in touch is huge, but closing on time in many ways is bigger. On time for what the sales rep wants, never the goal of the customer. The customer's goal is to finish on time for what they as a company want. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So we want to make sure that not only is the purchase made, but the implementation is completed by the date that the customer wants. And as you get the details in your discovery, you're going to understand whether this is going to be a standard implementation or whether it might take longer or less time. You educate your customer through asking the right questions. You could do a lengthy introduction about who you are and all of the things that you've done before the meeting, or you can save all of that. Just ask the right questions and you'll demonstrate your professionalism. You want to show that you've done your homework and that the sales team has spoken with the pre-sales engineers. Everybody's on the same page. You want to demonstrate that you're taking them seriously by asking second and third level questions, no first level questions. You don't want to be doing basic qualification and basic discovery. You want to focus on their issue, not necessarily on what you specifically like to sell, but on what they are trying to solve for. Every time that you step outside of that, you run the risk of potentially losing trust. So if you need to step outside of their primary issue, you need to link it. Now, I know you said your issue is X, but I find that many of our customers facing X are also facing Y. Is that true for you? Something like that. You want to indicate that you can solve issues they may not have thought of yet. You do that by those questions. When many of our customers are facing issue X, they may be facing X, Y, and Z. Would you mind if I asked you a few more questions? Just make sure that everything that's on the table ends up in the conversation. You want to demonstrate your professionalism. You want to demonstrate that you are focused on their use case. If someone buys a very fancy computer and they plan to use it as a hammer, that is their use case. You're respecting their use case, not necessarily exactly what you designed your product for. And you have the expertise that they need to get the job done. We're going to talk a little bit about discovery from basic to complex. Basic discovery, this is what your AEs are doing, is deciding what products or services to present to the customer. Additional outcome-based discovery, your AEs should also be doing, and this is based on the goals, the value, and the desired impact of implementing your solution. These two phases should be complete by the time that the call gets passed to you and it's time for you to interact with the tech team of the customer or with maybe the C-suite or the buying committee. You come in at step 3, which is additional workflow based. So this is implementation. This is, do we need an API? This is any workflow that the customer is going to do that integrates your solution. So where are the efficiencies? Is there scalability? What are the additional outcomes that will come from integrating your solution into the workflow? Before we get to workflow, that's all sales. After workflow, this affects your scope. It takes time. This deep discovery isn't always done in one call. Often they only schedule you for one call, but it is okay and often important to request a second one. This is not a transactional sale. If it was, they wouldn't need a solutions engineer on it. This is about building a relationship, a partnership that lasts. It takes multiple conversations. Some of them you'll have, some of them your sales team will have, but you need to talk to end users. department managers, the economic buyer, that's the person who controls the budget, and sometimes even legal and procurement. Legal and procurement often comes up when you're dealing with any kind of information technology, including financial technology, marketing technology, and healthcare technology. Those are all big for legal and procurement. So what makes a good discovery good for a pre-sales engineer? You need meaningful data. First of all, what are they trying to solve for? And what data do they have or use to track the issue? So literally, what size is the problem? How long has the problem existed? How are they measuring the effect of the problem? That's the data you need. That data that they're using to measure and define the problem in a perfect world is also going to be the data that they use to define success. But it isn't always. So how will success be measured? All the metrics: time, money, workflow efficacy, morale. Does it create a competitive advantage? Does it ease their customer experience? Right? There's all kinds of success metrics. It's really important that you define what those success metrics are. If they plan to measure your success in a way that doesn't make any sense for your product, you need to know that in advance and maybe help re-educate them on where they're going to find the most meaningful data. You also need to help discover latent and core needs. Presenting needs, the ones that they tell you about right up front, are usually only part of the story. You need to be multi-threaded. There need to be multiple contacts at different job levels and descriptions, not just decision makers, because the decision makers, unfortunately, always leave stuff out. In a perfect world, you're going to answer about 18 questions. You're going to ask about 25. Normally, you're not going to get them all answered. They're not going to know. What's perfect is that when they don't know an answer, you can ask them to commit to getting you that answer, and it sets you up really well for your next call, whether that next call is with you or whether that next call is with the sales rep is a decision you can make later on. But when you always owe each other answers, that pretty much nails that you're going to connect again and keep this conversation going. In talk time, effective reps only talk about 49% of the time. So you don't want to do what I'm doing right now, which is doing most of the talking. Instead, you want to be in a position where you're doing at least as much listening as the customer and about the same amount of talking. After this slide, we're going to go ahead and we're going to ask for some questions. So we're almost there, but get some meaningful data. You have three categories of data that are really relevant for you. One is, how are they describing their current situation? Are they using emotional terms? If they're using emotional terms, it's very hard to logic your way through a feeling, but it's important to know. Are they wishing? Are they hating? Are they saying something is slow? Do they want? Do they need? Do they wonder? Right? This helps you to understand where they are in the process of making a purchase and what their level of urgency is. If they say hate, slow, need, probably higher urgency. Wish, wonder, want, lower urgency. What are their presenting needs? Presenting needs are, I'm bleeding. Core needs are, I need to avoid sharp things, right? So are they just giving you presenting needs? I'm bleeding. Or do they talk about core problems? How do I avoid sharp things? How long has it been this way, and what is keeping them from changing it? It could be that budget is keeping them from changing it. It could be that they're trying to build it themselves internally. It could be that they've been shopping and shopping and they just haven't found something that can meet all of their needs, but it matters. What have they tried so far, and how much of that do they want to keep in place? All of that is going to affect your technical scope. Next piece, positive and negative impact. we tend to talk a lot about the positive impact that our solution could have, but we don't talk enough about the negative impact of not implementing the best possible solutions. Most tech solutions are foundational solutions, meaning they have many dependencies, many things are built on them. So negative impact is of critical importance to discuss, because if they have very little negative impact, they have very little urgency. The more negative impact that you can find and that you get them to say out loud increases their urgency, and they make the sales conversation for you. They look more deeply at their own issues, and they tend to be more candid about what they share with you. And what is their intention? Are they trying to educate themselves and create their own solution? Purchase multiple a la carte products? Do they want a whole platform? And are they trying to achieve specific goals, KPIs, OKRs? Sammy, if you would like to share some questions, I'll be happy to answer them before we move on.
Okay.
Okay.
First of all, just wanted to let you know that the sound is much better, perfectly
Oh,
clear.
good.
So we fixed that issue.
Great.
Do have a couple of questions so far.
Perfect.
So as a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw those in Q&A. Let's see. Interested in your thoughts on using Discovery to ask trap setting questions to differentiate against or box out the competition proactively.
Okay, so I get this question not infrequently, and I'm okay with trap setting questions in the event that you create them to make your customer look smart. In the event that you create them and your customer is faced with the I didn't know that, that's going to make your customer feel less than and maybe even unworthy of you. And so I'm going to suggest that a way you can do that is, if you want to set the trap setting question and you see that, oh my goodness, look on their face, you can then start to answer for them saying, Mr. Customer, I know you already know that blah, blah, blah is always foundational. What I'm really curious about, and then reframe your question more gently. I hope that answers your question. Next
That's
step.
a great answer. Okay. This person is just hoping we get some advice on how to get AEs, experienced and newer AEs, to understand the importance of this process and value it as a sales tool. So just wanted to.
Amen and hallelujah. So you're welcome to show them this deck after the event, but I would go to sales enablement, or I would ask your boss to go to sales enablement and ask that your team be trained on thorough communication with your engineering team. Because when you go in without enough information, it wastes your extremely valuable time. You are expensive. You are very, very nuanced in what you are capable of doing. And if you are in there, killing flies with a sledgehammer, that is just a waste of corporate resources. So I would talk to your boss. I would also ask if either they or you can talk to sales enablement. And I would put right on the line that you don't want to keep wasting yourself as a resource. Believe it or not, if you can talk to your customer only once or twice instead of multiple times, your odds of closing go up. So the more times that you have to talk to a customer because sales didn't communicate, the lower your closing ratio is going to be. No company wants that. That was a really smart question. Thank you for asking. Sammy?
Awesome. Okay. This one is a question about a specific way of starting discovery. So they say they like to start discovery with the questions along the lines of, if you could wave a magic wand and fix anything today to make your job easier, what would it be? And then to start to frame your discovery around that. What are your thoughts on this? And do you think this is a good practice or a bad practice?
I have to ask, what is the role of that person? What role are you in? Are you a pre-sales engineer or are you a seller?
So if you, whoever, that's an anonymous person, let's see. Pre-sales.
Ah, pre-sales. Okay, I'm going to say that that is not a bad way to start, but that if your communication with your sellers is good, that question should already be answered in spades, and you should have that answer. If your communication with your seller is bad and you need to get the basic background down, go right ahead. Additionally, I would suggest you put it in a little context. If you do have some good conversation with your sellers, you can say, you know, I have all of the notes from my AE. I think I understand your situation, but I'd like to ask you myself, right? Let them know you did your homework. Let them understand that you are looking at them as a fresh conversation, but you do have the homework. You don't want them to be afraid, oh my God, I have to tell my whole story again, right? Does that make sense?
I think that was a great answer. Yeah. So I think
Okay.
we're good on questions for now. So I think we could keep going. And then again, if you guys have any questions at any time, post them in the Q&A. And when the next time Elizabeth stops, we'll get to those questions.
Cool. Thanks so much. All right, let's keep going. So we know that our buyer has buying criteria, but do we ask what it is? This is a place that I find a lot of, particularly pre-sales engineers, getting a little shy, but we know three things for sure. We know there are existing criteria. We know there are some unknowns that they're going to build into their criteria as they go along. And we know they have some business goals. So how do we get to what are their actual buying criteria? They're going to tell you that their criteria are time, cost, and quality. That's what they always say. That's not true. What we know for sure is they have some existing criteria. What are those buying criteria? Does it have to be able to integrate with this particular dependency? Does it have to deliver three things and make a good cup of coffee? Whatever. They have some criteria. The unknowns. How much research have you done so far? What else would you like to know? The reality is that nobody knew that they needed to vacuum their home while they weren't home until the Roomba was invented. Nobody knew that they needed a camera in their cell phone until the first smartphone was invented. But now we know. So when we discover that they haven't done a lot of research, or that maybe they haven't done the right research, they may not have expanded their horizons enough. And we want to make sure that we can provide them with some other useful buying criteria. And lastly, we know that as a corporation, they have OKRs and they have KPIs, and different departments who are invested in making this purchase have different goals they're trying to meet. So what business goals is this purchase linked to? That's a question I would be asking everybody on the call. And I would be making sure that my sales rep is asking everybody on the call. Because the more of those deliverables that you can address successfully in your tech call, the better it is for you. And of course, in business goal land, how will success be measured and over what period? If your solution does a great job in 9 months and their deadline is 3 months, you're screwed. Better that you know in advance. You don't want to find out after the deal has closed and they're unhappy. This is your opportunity to set reasonable expectations, but if you don't ask, you won't know. So all of these things tend to be in the bucket of buying criteria. You need to learn that. If you just take these 6 pieces and ask questions around them, that will give you a good start. When will it be ready? Is it scalable? Can we make it work here at my company? What is the cost and what's the cost of integration? Will we need help and support? If so, what does it cost? When is it available? Who do we talk to? What are the renewal terms, right? All common questions. Most of these can be asked by your AE and you'll already know. Some of them are very specific to you. Now, we talked about the importance of multi-threading. In a perfect world, this call is not going to be just you, the pre-sales engineer, and an engineer on the other side. We're going to have some decision makers, some stakeholders, some folks who are really invested in this happening. We have studied, the Revenue Enablement Society and others have studied what kinds of deals stay closed. The strongest deals, the deals that stay closed, the deals that buy more, the deals that become brand advocates are multi-threaded deals. That means folks from multiple departments, multiple levels, because we're getting everybody on the same page before the sale is made. That means that we get a complete story from them and they get reasonable expectations from us. The purchasing team or committee might have Jennifer, an end user. She's going to tell us one story. She's going to talk about what would make her workflow easier. She's going to describe what's difficult and how much time she's wasting. Garrett, the frontline manager, discusses his departmental goals and that his budget is tight. Explains he doesn't want to make the purchase, but he can't afford to miss target. Christina, director of marketing, right? So we have 3 different levels here now, explains that the company has a plan to expand the demands on Garrett's department next year. So she needs a foundational solution that not only frees up time for Garrett, but then maybe allows him to operate more freely within his existing budget. So each of these 3 folks on the team or committee has provided us with an important piece of information. None of them gave us the whole story. So how do we get the right people involved? We need to ask the right questions in the right way at the right time. And again, if your SE or your EE, AE is on top of their game, they'll be asking these questions appropriately early on. So in the email conversations, who else do you think I should copy on this? Really helpful to get names and contact information and get folks involved early. Who else will want to be in on this conversation? Who will you need to email the notes from this conversation to is another good question. Who will be affected by this purchase? When you're in live conversation, a great place to start is at this point, the department director usually wants to be involved. Or at this point, the VP of X and such normally wants to be involved. Who should we be inviting to this meeting? Who else is involved in this purchase? And then before you send your tech proposal or your scope of work, if you know this to be true, you need to make the statement. It is time to get the legal, procurement, senior management team involved. What's the best way to get on their calendar? If you know you need to get a sign off from these folks before you write a proposal, just lay it on the line. There's no point in dancing. And that person, do they prefer a presentation or a proposal? So do they want it written or do they want it in a conversation? Now, we talked a little bit about presenting versus latent core needs. We're going to talk a little bit more about that because that is part of the magic that engineers bring to these conversations. Presenting problem, there is too much water in the boat. Presenting questions, how did it get there? How do we get it out? How do we keep it from coming back? Those are AE questions. Engineer questions are core needs. How do we avoid icebergs? How do we engineer a stronger hull? How do we prevent sabotage? How do we deter whale attacks? How do we avoid overloading the boat, right? These are engineering questions. These are all the questions that you come in with. Now, if you as an SE come in and only focus on the presenting questions that have been shared with you by your seller, you're not really adding value. You're just answering the questions of how do we integrate? What does your API do, right? You don't want to be an order taker. You want to be a partnership developer. And you can do that by working in the core needs discovery area, right? So you take those presenting needs, and what you want to know is, how did we get here? How do we solve the problem that brought us here? How do we prevent ending up here again? And then we can address how to make a nice boat, right? So presenting versus latent and core needs involves a little digging. Presenting represents what's on fire right now. In the boat example, the water on board is obvious. The sabotage might not be. So when you talk to your buyer, a lot of the time, it's going to take several questions and maybe a couple of calls to get to the core need. How did we get here? When someone's mess is on fire, they are often so busy firefighting that they lose track of figuring out what the ignition point was. Core needs can surface as a customer discusses the situation and learns about possible solutions. These conversations tend to evolve with questions like, but what about? When they say, but what about? You're learning about dependencies and contingencies. Those are really important conversations. Core needs are not always visible to all parties on the buying team. You may need additional perspectives. If you have 3 or 4 people on the other side of the screen from you, and they're all just giving you a blank stare, you may need to talk to someone else who can help you get to how did we get here? But without knowing how we got here, you may not be presenting a complete solution. So it's a worthy question to get answered. Core needs may be recognized after a customer uses your tool or your solution and sees that additional issues are causing internal friction. They want to accomplish more, and this sets sellers up for an upsell. And you may think that sounds like a good thing. Maybe. It can also be a bad thing, and here's why. When they recognize additional issues that are causing friction, and particularly when they realize that you can solve it, their first question is, why didn't you tell me? So if you can do a great job of uncovering those latent and core needs, you can sell them the right size solution the first time around. So how do we uncover core needs? You need to change your approach from pain, right, the fire, to the outcome that they want. What's on fire right now? It's pretty easy to uncover the outcome that's immediately desirable, but that is a terrible place to stop. You want to start by saying, I'd like to change direction a little bit. And you're going to ask a question that's 1 or 2 or 3 degrees away from the outcome. You're going to start talking about workflow. You're going to start talking about who's affected. You're going to start talking about what new outcomes would this make possible? Not just the 1st degree outcome, but maybe the 2nd degree outcome. Not just what's going to be possible immediately, but once that new outcome's the norm, what can you build on that? Time machine. Time machine questions are great. Has this purchase been under consideration for a while? The longer it's been under consideration, the less it's tied to an immediate OKR or KPI. That is a problem. Things that are tied to immediate OKRs and KPIs get bought, get instituted, get used, get implemented, right? Something that's been laying around for a while could get shelved again, in which case you need to start developing some urgency. One great way to do that is to point out that it may relate to an OKR, or it could be an important foundational piece to another goal. But be wary of needs that have been sitting around for a while, because they may get shelved again. Last but not least, we want to move to targeting. If they're not focused on any particular part of their current need, they just know this is a mess, they know they need to fix it, and it's really hard to get them to focus in, hand it to them. Some of my customers also talk about ABC. Does that resonate with you? You start drilling down. Serve them up what the most common, most important pain points are of some others to get the conversation rolling. A lot of folks are intimidated when they're talking to engineers. You guys are really smart, and sometimes they just get a little nervous. All right, last but not least, success metrics, the accurate and the wrong. Whether your fish can ride a bicycle easily or at all is not governed by the quality of the bicycle, the seat position, the gear ratio, et cetera, et cetera. So whether your solution is successful is not necessarily governed by the quality of your solution. It is governed by the quality of implementation and the quality of the success metrics. So if the success of this bicycle is being governed by whether my fish can ride it, no, we know we're set up for failure. Some goals and some success metrics are just wrong. They are misaligned to the purchase at hand. You need to help your customer establish reasonable success metrics that are aligned to the purchase at hand. Here's what you're probably going to hear. Leadership wants to hit annual or quarterly goals. Makes sense. Which ones are tied to your product and purchase? Revenue and procurement want to save time and money. No surprise there. Frontline workers want better workflow, higher functionality. These are all metrics that they're going to try to drop into your bucket. You got to parse. These make sense? Those aren't really related to us. You need to know, department by department, stakeholder by stakeholder, how will the success of this purchase be measured? Are the metrics reasonable for the solution you're offering? What is a reasonable timeline? Don't wait. Tell them. Don't have them fill it in. You tell them. What other metrics and benchmarks should be used? Some of your solutions are going to save time or budget in ways that they have not considered. They're going to eliminate negative impacts that they didn't even notice. They're going to cause positive business impacts that they are not aware of. Make sure they're measuring the great things you're doing for them. How can you share your appropriate metrics with your buyers? I like doing it on a slide. I like discussing it throughout your conversation. When you say things like, when you see the reduction in man hours, when you see the reduction in man hours and have all of this human capital available for other projects, right? You build on it over and over and over again so that it becomes their reasonable expectation for one of the metrics that they're going to use. Get your success metrics right. You want to set reasonable expectations on the part of the buyer. And equally importantly, you want to cancel out unrealistic expectations. You can't finish your discovery process until you finish agreeing on success metrics. This is part of your scope of work. Be absolutely clear on what is and is not in the scope, and make sure your client agrees. The right metrics ensure that your offering performs as well as or better than expected, and perfect world, better than. And this alignment creates a strong foundation for the negotiation and closing phase. All of those success metrics need to be shared with your seller so that when they write their final proposal, they make sure that they include them. I'm going to do a quick summary and then we'll get to your questions. So, Section 1, we talked about meaningful data. Really important to get the buying criteria, the current state, the desired state, and then help them set a more reasonable version of those things. Understand what is the presenting need, what is the causal need or the core need, and what are ancillary needs. Very important to multi-thread, get multiple stakeholders involved, all of them telling you their story, their goals, their needs, so that you can address all of them and right-size your customer. And last but not least, success criteria. How do they want to measure success? How should they measure success? And what did you agree to? Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right. let's see here. So again, guys, if you got any questions, throw them in Q&A. Maybe you can turn your video back on. Hopefully that will work. It went off flawlessly for the rest of the time, so that was awesome. Okay,
Great.
we have one. Have you tested different descriptions for the invitation title? Oftentimes, attendee joined the discovery meeting expecting a software demo. Agree that setting the expectations is key when the prospect extends the invite, includes new attendees who have not yet been engaged. My assumption is that they read discovery equals they are discovering more about our solution.
So I never advocate for putting demo in the title of any meeting, including when you do your first technical review. I encourage you to say things like technical review. When your rep is doing a discovery meeting, they can put in things like deeper dive, whatever, but all of the specifics of what happened in a meeting belong in the agenda. And if your sales reps have not yet learned to write an agenda, I'm going to be a little sassy here and say send them back to high school, but they should be writing an agenda for every single meeting, and that should be contained in the invite. So it shouldn't just be reliant on the title. It should be reliant on your sales rep's skill in creating an agenda that your buyer has agreed to in advance. So you have your introductory call, you do a little bit of qualification, you agree you need to talk more. And then your sales rep is going to say, in our next call, I'd like to discuss X, Y, Z. What questions would you like to explore with us? They're going to say blah, blah, blah. That's going to get written on an agenda. That's going to be in your invite. I hope that helps.
Awesome. Okay, well, we haven't had any other questions come through quite yet. I'll give it another minute here if you guys have any other questions. Somebody said, this isn't a question, they just want to thank you for the great guidance focused on selling outcomes that will be helpful in reverse engineering impactful discovery questions. So that's really awesome.
Aw, thanks.
Cool. Well, you guys, it looks like you were just so thorough that there's no more questions right now. So if you do have any other questions, you can definitely connect with Elizabeth on LinkedIn. I know she's happy to chat. She is a great resource for all things pre-sales and sales enablement. So definitely connect with her. Somebody just asked if the slides will be available. Yes, we will send within the next day or two, definitely by Monday. We'll send a recording of the session as well as a copy of the slides to everyone that registered. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that.
May I have a recording copy as well, Tammy?
Yes, of course. We'll make sure you get
Thanks.
that. Sure.
And friends, please, if you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn anytime, please do. If you'd like to follow me, I do a fair amount of these kinds of things in my posts. And I would love to hear from you, particularly when I get it wrong, so that you can educate me. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Be well. Bye-bye.